whether the novelty can be trusted. As a trained investigator and operative, Malcolm Jamaica left no trace behind in his explorations of Danielle's apartment, nor did he take anything away other than information. He learned of the woman's employment at the Colloquia Rodentii. This interested him more than the woman herself. It was a fact he had been looking for since he first saw her, although of course he hadn't known exactly what the fact would turn out to be. "I call it personal synchronicity," he explained to an acquaintance many years later as he lay in a government-subsidized sickbed. "Things have a way of coming together in a subjectively coincidental manner if you only let them. Kind of like that old Cheap Trick song," the acquaintance, a would-be biographer from one of the larger of the Bovine Islands, replied. What is Cheap Trick? Jamaica wondered in his delirium. If an answer to that question was forthcoming, it is neither recorded in the annals of that future time, nor our business to pursue. We must join the younger, sharper Jamaica, as he furtively entered the headquarters of the Colloquia Rodentii. It was after hours, and only a wretched, borderline autistic security guard remained in the building. Jamaica emerged from a potted plant in an office on the second floor, and spent the first few minutes forcing himself to look through a secretary's family photographs and trinkets as a way of getting his haste under control. After all, "I've got all night," he reminded himself. One of the photographs showed the secretary, some 20 pounds lighter than her current arrangement, standing before an old cannon with her 2 children and some old woman obviously unrelated biologically to them. Frogs seemed to be the dominant theme among the trinkets that littered her desk, although there was a small plastic camel wearing a felt sombrero. Jamaica took a deep breath and moved on. The offices were each connected to one or more others, like a system of caves going deeper and deeper into the building. By the time Jamaica came upon a collection of old-fashioned hats in a cupboard, he had begun to wonder whether he would collapse from sensory overload. The remarks clamber like donkeys' asides. Jamaica hadn't counted on the presence of the cleaning staff. He had just stumbled upon Danielle Apticus's desk when he heard the telltale rattle of mops and slurping of bad vending machine coffee. He slipped into a crawl space and made his way up and up until he at last emerged in the executive officer's private suite on the top floor. The walls were paneled in heavy dark wood, lined with nondescript, but all the more intriguing for being so, abstract expressionist paintings. The furniture was a mixture of the 1940s and the late 1950s. Looking around, all Jamaica could envision these rooms being used for either cocktail parties or the most old-fashioned of trysts. Finally, he discovered the conference room. As he dragged his fingers down the length of the polished table, he imagined Danielle making solitary visits to the sofa-filled room outside. The thought didn't bother him. He wasn't obsessed with the woman. However, the idea that she might be submitting to the sloppy attentions of some fat, middle-aged creep offended his sense of aesthetic righteousness. To be honest, he thought, she shouldn't even be with someone like him. He had let himself go physically over the past 10 years. No one would believe that he had once been the young man whom girls dropped by the convenience store just to ogle. On the wall at the end of the table hung a framed photograph of several men in suits ostentatiously shaking hands with a group of lunar mice. Jamaica studied it closely. The picture was old, probably taken in the early 70s, about the time the Colloquia Rodentii had been founded. So it's not all a sham, he thought. There really is some legitimate basis to this organization's activities. The door behind him opened. Whirling around, Jamaica was confronted by a woman on the cleaning staff. Not a highly paid operative or nothing. He immediately took the offensive. "Who are you?" he demanded irritably, putting his fist on his hips. "The question is, who are you?" the woman returned. "That's right," Jamaica agreed. "Well," the woman insisted, shifting her grip on her basket of cleaning implements. "Who are you?" Clout, so far history, sickens the flyleaf. "I'm Diggerel Ognog," Jamaica declared, tapping his chest, stating the name of a friend of the collections. "You must be Miss Apticus." He advanced on the cleaning woman with a smile and an outthrust hand. The woman denied it. "No, I'm Dora Clabmake. I clean the offices. How'd you get in here?" Jamaica ignored the question. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm still not used to your human form. I see one human female and naturally assume it's the one I've spoken to over the phone." "What do you mean, human?" Dora, the cleaning staffer, asked. Jamaica allowed himself a proud little simper. "Well," he began, "I'm a lunar mouse." "Oh, I know I look human." He showed Dora his profile. "Pretty good, huh? But I'm not. I'm the first subject of the mouse-to-human surgery experiments. Do what? I had expected to see Miss Apticus, Miss Danielle Apticus, Jamaica added, looking up at Dora expectantly. I know who she is, the woman replied. She doesn't work after hours. Nobody does. I still don't know how you got in here. I'm a lunar mouse, Jamaica insisted. We have ways. I'm going to call security, Dora decided. She moved toward the phone on the wall to her right. Okay, Jamaica agreed, smiling idiotically. He followed Dora to the phone. No, you stay over. Dora started to gesture with her basket, but Jamaica ended all discussion by delivering a solid punch to the woman's head. She dropped to the heavy shag carpet unconscious. You hit a woman? Doug Philapster, regional director for the department that Jamaica was subcontracted to, asked upon reading a description of the above scene in Jamaica's report. She was a woman. That is correct, Jamaica replied. We don't hit women, Mr. Jamaica. Philapster gouged the paper on his desk with his pen. Why not? Jamaica wondered. Because we're gentlemen, Philapster replied. Ever hear of the concept? Structured data of set. Of course, Malcolm Jamaica had heard of the concept of the gentleman. Even before his mission had been concluded, and he had had his dispiriting little confab with Regional Director Flabster, he had been pondering the subject and his own relationship to it. He considered himself a gentleman because to him a gentleman is one who strives to make others comfortable in his presence. I can't remember where I read that definition, he thought as he made his escape from the Colloquial Redentii building. I don't even know why I've adopted that definition among the dozen or so out there. How he reconciled his understanding of the gentlemanly concept with making Dora Clapmake most uncomfortable is unknown. Jamaica was often inconsistent. Hypocritical, some call it, he said to himself with snorting derision as he stepped into an all-night coffee parlor to enjoy a piece of pound cake before heading back to his room and the gift of sleep. The next day he awoke at 11:30 and went immediately downstairs, having slept in his clothes, to see if Miss Pannier had anything to eat. He didn't want to have to bother with cooking. He had sworn that the first issue of Boron's Eternal Half-Life would be ready for distribution by the next morning. The door to the old lady's kitchen was locked, however. He could see a pot of boiling water on the stove. It appeared to be nearly boiled dry. He pounded on the door and called out, Mrs. Pannier! Mrs. Pannier! But was not answered. Fetching a tool from upstairs, he returned and opened the door with it. He turned off the burner and went looking for his landlady, again calling her name. She was dead. Collapsed, from what he could determine, within the previous hour on the floor of her tiny living room. What to do? Jamaica muttered to himself. He stood up from crouching over the body and looked about. Was there anything he desperately needed to steal? Certainly nothing in the house was of much value. However, for the sake of future remembrance, he selected a small ceramic bear in fisherman's attire. With this in his pocket, he went back to the kitchen. He made himself a sandwich while he called the police. Did she have any relatives? One of the policemen asked him after arriving. Gee, I hope not, Jamaica nearly said aloud. Cancelled. Sliding. An old day. Mrs. Pannier's only child, a son named Rupert, flew in from the earth 2 days later. I may as well tell you, I'm selling the house. The son, a tall, wide-hipped man in his early 50s, let Jamaica know. I figured you would, Jamaica replied. Why? Rupert Pannier eyed the lodger with suspicion. Just makes the most sense, you being from Earth. Jamaica let the comment stand for everything that might be said. Pannier nodded, allowing the other man to think that he understood all the possible subtext. Whether he should be offended or not, he didn't know, but to be safe, he threw out the following. That will take some time, however, to make the arrangements, so you'll have plenty of time to find another place to stay. Jamaica laughed. He could afford to. I'm not moving, he said. Now look here, Pannier began. I've got a 6-month lease, Jamaica interrupted. Cancelled with the death of my mother. Oh, no, no, no. Jamaica shook his head exactly as his own mother had done when denying him some quite impossible indulgence. The contract is with the household. It stays in effect, despite the owner's demise. I can't sell this place with a lodger in residence. Pannier conveyed his desperation to secure his legacy and return to the comfort and routine of his life back home. Jamaica wanted to say, too bad, but instead smiled. That's no problem, he told Pannier. Get a broker to handle the sale. Transfer the administration of the lease to him. I'll pay the rent to him, and you get a piece of it while you're awaiting sale. Pannier considered. He didn't like the broker idea. I really don't understand why you're selling the place anyway. You could rent out the downstairs and have a nice income. No, Pannier negated that idea. I want the whole thing off my hands. No one knew it yet, but this was Pannier's chance to divorce his wife. The lack of pretense endears the director. Upon receiving a brief note from Jamaica regarding the death of Green Purbrick, Regional Director Doug Flabster passed it, along with his own disapproving comments, to Central Director Ken Labstein. The latter read the note and Flabster's appendix aloud to his 2 main lieutenants, Agents Brooke and Napple. as the three men sat at Lapstein's office. "Oh, Doug," Lapstein chuckled once he had finished reading. "You are a prude, aren't you?" He looked at Brooke and Napple. "I don't see how such a squeamish man got to be a regional director." He shook his head. "Well," Brooke replied, "his father was a big contributor to Senator Pulper's coffers for years." "Was he?" Lapstein pursed his lips. "Well, that explains it. Still, to get upset because this Jamaica guy terminated an opponent when the man was helpless, it's just so much schoolboy angst. This isn't chivalry times." He boomed wide-eyed at Brooke. He boomed wide-eyed at Brooke and Napple. They laughed. Their boss was a character. Still, Lapstein sat back and looked to his right out the window. It doesn't pay to antagonize people, especially a touchy little prude like Flabster. "Tell me," he turned back to his lieutenants, "who is this Jamaica? Where'd he come from?" Napple opened a file in his lap and handed it over. "He's a subcontractor, runs his own business when he isn't working for us." "Well, who's his contract through?" "Toadscabode." "Ah," Lapstein vocalized, nodding with comprehension. "Now I see the roots of Flabster's objections, his moral indignation." "Sir?" Brooke wondered. Lapstein ran his tongue against the backs of his bottom teeth. Toadscabode's a loose cannon," he said. "We've never been able to put him firmly under our thumb. We work together because it's mutually beneficial to do so, but—" He let the matter drop. "Hey," he said, brightening, reaching into a drawer in his desk. "Have you guys seen this one?" He brought out a small figurine of a camel dressed as a priest and set it on the desk. Straightforward narrative, adopted reluctantly. "I was having dinner with my good friend Andy Summers when word reached me of a possible problem with Malcolm Jamaica. After the distinctive message bell sounded, I begged Andy's indulgence for a moment while I answered the summons. I pressed a button near the pepper shaker, a button which caused the rotogravonic apparatus to descend from the ceiling and drop over my head. I smiled at Andy and engaged the mechanism with the code word FRAP. "Hello there! Is this Toadscabode I'm speaking to?" came the voice of Winston Herr, my liaison with the Department of Namelessness. "Yes, Mr. Herr, what can I do for you?" I replied. Andy signaled to a servant to bring him another ice cream parfait. "Toadscabode, we're having some trouble with the Jamaica narrative. We'd like you to do something about it, I'm afraid." "I'm afraid, too, when you start describing a man and his assignment as a narrative. What seems to be the problem, old boy?" "We feel that Mr. Jamaica seems to have gone somewhat off track, as it were." "How so?" "Well, this side trip to Babwyalgo," Herr stammered. "Do you really think this is necessary? I mean, shouldn't he be getting on with his mission?" "Herr," I spoke sternly, "do you have any idea of all that Jamaica's mission entails?" "Well, I assume it's to do with this deschafter." "A distraction, Herr," I interrupted. "A mere distraction. A fascination in the mind of a long-legged pig. You show me a functioning deschafter, and I'll show you the terminus of this little narrative." "Well, Toadscabode, isn't that what we want?" Herr demanded impatiently. "I mean, isn't that what we're working toward?" "Herr," I said, "I suggest you take a page from the contemporary philosopher and live for the moment. Enjoy the ride. It's the journey, not the destination, that counts. But good evening, Mr. Herr." I ended the transmission and sent the lucite dome back into the ceiling. "Sorry about that," I said to Andy, who looked a mite bilious. Stylistically, I am governed by masturbatory habits. "And what's wrong with that?" you asked the observers in the room as you read the title of this piece and prepare to watch me flog myself. Rest assured, however, that I do not intend to denigrate my style or my technique. I do not find the fact expressed in the title to be one that I should be ashamed of. I write to please myself. That being said, however, in the interest of harmony, I contacted Malcolm Jamaica and gave him to understand that he should keep in mind the opinions of others when going about his aimless task. Appearances are important. One would like to be natural and loose, secure in one's identity like a fat rock star, but in the day-to-day interchange of human relations, this is one of the most difficult states to achieve. Just ask the next saint you come across. What the most difficult state of all to achieve is I cannot say. Probably equanimity in the face of inequity, but my experience in such matters is necessarily limited. I am a middle-aged fat-ass living in the middle of the most culturally benighted time period / geographic zone in all the corners and wrinkles on the madman's map of the universe. Jamaica, always amenable to my direction, agreed to carry on in the spirit I described to him, and, as I further suggested, to refrain from sending any more reports back home. It would only disturb them further, no matter what you were to say, I explained. "I don't think they like me," Jamaica complained. No, old boy, it's me they don't like. They're just taking it out on you." I hastened to reassure him, though I knew that deep down he didn't give a shit. I know now, having read his posthumously published diary, that he knew that I didn't give a shit either. And so, neither of us gave a shit. We laughed about it then, the unspoken joke standing between us like the unthinkable barrier of space separating his existence on the moon of Babualgo from my slumped grounding in substandard housing out in the woods somewhere, 1,000 unemployed rednecks waiting outside for a glimpse of the non-believer. I flashed more light on the origin of the tree. The tree whose great branches support the moons of Babualgo, Kiffer, and Stunnage, and whose thirsty roots bind together the earth and its attendant travelers, the tree named in the ancient tongue Schlepperbaum, was grown from a tiny seed brought to these lands in the trousers pocket of the man who ate with his back teeth the inscrutable dish akimbo. No one knows where he acquired the seed. Some say he picked it out of the droppings of a pangolin that he had followed back from the purgatory of the unwilling contestant. Some have theorized that the seed was actually one of Akimbo's rotten teeth, fallen out while eating pound cake. Akimbo's own memoirs describe the seed as but one of dozens that he had found in the bottom of a bag of hamburger buns. This last account has been discounted by most scholars, however, as Akimbo was both an imaginative liar and an illiterate. His so-called memoirs have long been rumored to be the work of a group of disaffected tragedians whose hopes for a revival of live drama as mass entertainment were doomed to failure from the beginnings of time. Most people associate the sprouting of that tiny seed with the beginnings of time, but their associations only go to show just how ignorant the average man is. It is a widely held belief, for example, that the tree is purely metaphorical, and that the urn of happiness, said to be buried near its taproot, is something that each of us can find if we only look inside our hearts. The truth is that we know with a fair amount of accuracy when the tree's cotyledons first emerged into the sunlight, and as for the urn of happiness, that was emptied long ago by George Clooney. He has since been trying to fill it up again by means of an automated process that will put metaphor to shame, but so far success in this regard has eluded him. My personal knowledge of the tree is limited to what I have seen on the old episodes of Crazy for Capital, a show that puts science in a financial perspective, where the tree is depicted in cartoon format as having sprung from the mind of a contract laborer at a privately funded research firm. Now for a refreshing Coca-Cola, the anthropomorphized tree proclaims, while all the uniformed birds in its branches make that annoying whoo sound, in which the phrase "in which" is assumed present. Malcolm Jamaica, like most of his fellow humans, revered the tree. However, unlike a majority of them, he did not deify it, and thus did not engage in any active worship of it. The tree is just another object in the universe, he explained to Andy Privet, as another meeting of Merlin's minions broke up. An extremely important one, no doubt, but still just another object like you or I. I think that's very insightful, Privet replied, gazing thoughtfully at his new friend. Thank you, Jamaica acknowledged the compliment. Well, I think it's blasphemous, Dirk Collateral announced tersely as he gathered his action figures into his book bag. I'm sorry, Jamaica told him, though the look on his face hardly matched that sentiment. If the tree is just an object, then how do you explain the miraculous fact of its existence? Collateral demanded. Before Jamaica could respond, he went on. If the tree's root system, and this has been confirmed by science, were just a fraction less cohesive, then the tree could not stretch from here. If the tree's root system, and this has been confirmed by science, were just a fraction less cohesive, then the tree could not stretch from here to Stunnage, and then our world wouldn't be as extensive as it is. Dirk, Jamaica countered, if the tree didn't exist, then it wouldn't exist. And then we wouldn't exist. Collateral slung his book bag over his shoulder with a bark. Science has proven that our existence is inextricably linked with the tree. Yeah, Jamaica pushed. So, how do you account for that? Dirk, if we didn't exist, we wouldn't be here to argue about this. So what exactly is your point? Jamaica wondered how far he should allow Collateral to propound his stupidity before he paralyzed him. Privet, however, jumped in. Dirk, how can you be a member of this group and not be at least open-minded about the possibility of a non-deified tree, he asked. I am open-minded, Collateral insisted. I just have respect for tradition. I don't know why you come to these meetings. This is the only place I have to show off my action figures, Collateral confessed.